Thank you, Kate, and welcome to Inside Politics. I'm John King. Thank you for sharing your day with us. Another busy one. The former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort back in court today, insisting he did not lie after promising to cooperate with the special counsel. Plus, the Green New Deal. Its boosters say the new wish list will force a long overdue debate on climate change. Its detractors say it's too much, too expensive, and could help President Trump's re-election hopes. And crunch time on Capitol Hill, lawmakers racing to turn a compromised border security framework into a detailed legislative plan. CNN is told the president is ready to sign it, even though many of his conservative boosters hate it. One historic wrinkle in this deal, the House committee that decides how your tax dollars get spent is for the first time led by two women.
These men probably never imagined that women would be in charge.
Yeah.
And you are.
Yeah. This is what I gave her when she became chair. And when I was elected by the steering committee, she's the first one to call and congratulate me. So we have that sort of relationship.
Do you actually use that at the hearings? Or it's ceremonial?
I use it for lots of things. Right.
All right, I'll leave that one to your imagination. We begin. Laughter's okay. We begin the hour, though, waiting for lawmakers on Capitol Hill to put their new spending compromise on paper, and waiting for the president to say publicly what our sources tell us he is saying privately, that he plans to sign it despite not liking it. We should see the president any moment, greeting the president of Colombia, who's coming here for a White House visit. We'll bring you that as soon as it happens. And we'll see if reporters get a chance to ask the president about that tentative deal reached by congressional negotiators to avoid another partial government shutdown. Two sources telling CNN the president does intend to sign this bipartisan deal. This tweet last night, pretty good hint. I want to thank all Republicans for the work you have done in dealing with the radical left on border security. Not an easy task, the president wrote, but the wall is being built and will be a great achievement. Friday is the deadline. House Democrats say the deal should be on paper today. Their plan is to vote tomorrow. Speaker Nancy Pelosi knows both liberals and conservatives are unhappy. She has this advice.
As with all compromises, I say to people, support the bill for what is in it, don't judge it for what is not in it. We can't pass it until it's ready, and when it's ready, we'll be ready to pass it.
CNN's Caitlin Collins live from the White House. Caitlin, we're waiting to see the president. Sources tell us he gets it, no more shutdown, sign it even though you don't like it, but no definitive answer yet.
No, and no White House official has been willing to go on the record to say that the president is going to sign this, despite the fact that Dana's reporting that the president is telling people he intends to sign it. That's because they know this is a president who often changes his mind, so they're not willing to go out further than he is, and they're waiting for the president to publicly say he's going to sign this bill. Now, the president had a phone call with the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, Senator Richard Shelby, last night. Shelby was trying to pitch this deal to the president, touting the numbers, saying that it's good for the president, but I'm told that the president wasn't completely sold by that phone call, because Shelby was making the argument to the president that this has over $1 billion for fencing on the southern border with Mexico, and that's in the range of what the president wanted. Well, John, I guess that depends on what your range is, since the president shut the government down, saying he wanted $5.7 billion, and he's getting far less than that in this agreement. However, despite all of that, and despite the fact that the president hasn't come out publicly and said, yes, I'm going to sign this, White House officials feel pretty confident that there's not going to be a government shutdown on Friday. But right now, Sarah Sanders told reporters earlier they are waiting to see the final text of this legislation.
I can't blame them there, wanting to actually see the text. It's an interesting theory. Actually see the text before you say whether you'll sign it. Caitlin Collins live at the White House. Caitlin, stay nearby in case the president talks in the next hour. With me in studio to share their reporting and their insights, CNN's Nia Malika Henderson, Michael Scher with the New York Times, Olivier Knox with SiriusXM, and Sungmin Kim with the Washington Post. If you watch the president's tweets and read the president's tweets, if you believe what our sources are telling us, he gets it, right? That I can't shut the government down again. There'll be a Republican revolt on Capitol Hill. I don't like this, but if you send me as it's described to me, I'll hold my nose, I'll sign it. And then what? Some executive action from the president to do more?
Yeah, that's certainly what it sounds like. I mean, we can see that the president are setting the table for this. I mean, he literally has said he's setting the table for either the national emergency, some sort of executive action where he gets money from this bill, about $1.3 billion. It's a little less, obviously, than what he wanted. It's a little less than what he was offered this summer as well. But he does seem to be essentially saying this will be part of a larger move to get money elsewhere. And, you know, there was some thinking that the Republicans would revolt against him if he tried to do something with executive action or national emergency. We'll see how that plays out.
That, to me, I'm interested in, as we wait for the legislation, then we're going to have to wait for 2 days of the votes, does the commentary get to the president in the sense that this is the first big act of the second half, if you will, of his term, and he looks weak?
I just keep thinking about the kerfuffle and what we saw back in March of last year when he had to be basically talked into signing that big funding bill because it didn't have that wall money, and because the talk show hosts, the Fox News personalities really tried to persuade him that this was on air, that this was not a good deal. But now the president does seem resigned that he is not going to get, at least from Congress, the money that he wants, and is looking towards that executive action. I will point out, though, that for the president to sign something, Congress has to actually pass something first. Right now, sources are telling us there's a lot of last-minute hang-ups involving, you know, an extension of the Violence Against Women Act, which is unrelated to this, but that Republicans want put in this package, federal back pay for federal contractors. There's some revolt among the left as well for not restraining immigration and custom enforcement priorities in this. But legislating is messy. Everyone seems to not like it all too much. So at the end of the day, it will most likely pass Congress.
At the end of the day. And so then the question becomes the president. And the president sometimes, number one, to your point, let's show you the difference here. The president turned down, at the beginning of the shutdown, right, in December, the president turned down a deal that would have given him $1.6 billion for 65 miles of barriers, walls. What the president wanted was 5.7. That's a lot more than 1.6, obviously. What negotiators agreed to, 1.375 for 55 miles. So he's getting less money, fewer miles of barriers, and he's trying to blame the radical left now and say, then I'll do something else. As he does that, he says the wall is being built. He keeps saying that. We just want to show you this, that you know, that is not factual. Here's what has happened during the Trump presidency. Miles of new barriers built? 0. Miles of replacement barriers started or finished? 40. Miles of new and replacement barriers approved? 80 plus. There's some construction about to happen on some new barriers. But as we sit here today, the number of new miles of wall built during this presidency, even though he keeps saying the wall is being built, is 0.
And look, the irony of this is if he had taken the strategy with the original deal that you just put up on the screen, sign it and spin it, basically sign the bill, and then he would have had an opportunity to do what he will now do, which is to try to find a way to spin that this is really a victory, that he's getting parts of the wall built, and to find other pots of money, potentially, either by declaring a national emergency, which I think we all think is probably less likely now, and rather to use the executive power of the government which he oversees to find ways to shift money around so that he can, again, spin his way to a victory. And the irony is that he could have done that without the government shutdown and without all of the damage.
And he probably could have gotten even more money if he had done this when Republicans still controlled the House.
Yeah, and that's the irony, right? Yeah, that's the actual irony. The actual irony is if there had been enough Republican support for his project, then he could have gotten it, but there wasn't. And the reason the national emergency is really dicey is a lot of these border lawmakers, a lot of them Republicans, they went through this fight, especially in Texas. They went through this fight in 06 and 07, all these eminent domain arguments, all these lawsuits. Some of these guys are up for re-election coming soon. They don't want to have this fight again. And so that's really the irony, that at any point, in theory, if they had enough GOP support, they could have done this in the last 2 years.
In 2 years, when he had a stronger political position, he still couldn't sell this when his party controlled everything. Now the question is, who will he listen to? Again, indications are the president gets this. He doesn't want to put his party through it again, but Congress has to pass it, then we'll read it, then we'll see what the president says, and one of the questions is, will he be swayed at the last minute by his de facto chief of staff?
I'm not happy either. Nobody should be happy. The president has every right to be angry. The so-called compromise is typical of the D.C. sewer and swamp, and its level of funding for security and safety of the American people is pathetic. The president would need to declare a national emergency. This is the time. That is a necessity. And the president, I think I know him pretty well, telegraphed that very thing just today. Sounds like a national emergency is going to be declared, but I have no insider information.
to conversations like that, and Sean's not the only one. The Wall Street Journal editorial board says this. The restrictionist talk show Riot is trashing the deal, and Mr. Trump grousing Tuesday may reflect that criticism. But these are the same critics who've coaxed Mr. Trump to crash into one immigration dead end after another. They seem to think Mr. Trump's duty is to fail repeatedly in the service of the politically impossible. The next time they give good advice will be the first time. Ouch. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean,
A little divide on the
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
part of the problem with what Sung-min said about the deal back last year, I guess, was the omnibus bill, was that they didn't have people like Mark Meadows and others who were conservatives on Fox News saying we want you to pass this, right? There was just a vacuum of that kind of support, and so all he was hearing from were the opponents of the idea, telling him that he should trash it. And so I haven't heard a lot, of public, support for it from the right, and that doesn't bode well.
We shall see. Again, the first challenge is for Congress to put it on paper. We expect that to happen by the end of the day. Stay tuned. Up next, President Trump says he's been cleared by the Senate Intelligence Committee, but it seems one of the top members of that committee not ready to go that far.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Does the National Security Advisor right now enjoy the full confidence of President Trump?
Yes, General Flynn does enjoy the full confidence of the president.
That was Kellyanne Conway 2 years ago today, just hours before Michael Flynn resigned from his post as the president's national security advisor. Flynn later cut a plea deal with the special counsel, and is said to be cooperating now. Back in court next hour, another Trump insider who cut a plea deal, but is now accused of breaking it. Former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort was convicted on one set of charges and then made a plea deal to avoid trial on a second set. His lawyers today filed a strongly worded legal brief challenging Robert Mueller's assertion that Manafort repeatedly lied to prosecutors after promising his cooperation. This is from the brief. Mr. Manafort did not lie, despite the considerable efforts of the Office of the Special Counsel. It cannot prove what did not happen. That partially redacted filing is 13 pages long. Nearly 7 of which, you see all the redactions there, nearly 7 pages deal with an August 2nd, 2016 meeting between Manafort and suspected Russian operative Konstantin Kilimnik. That was 10 days after Donald Trump's nominating convention, and Mueller's office said in a recent court filing it views that meeting as central to the investigation. CNN's Shimon Prokopez joins the conversation. Hard to know what's redacted yet again. We're left in the dark, literally, about some key aspects of this investigation. But Manafort's team pushing back pretty strongly, accusing the special counsel of overhyping this idea that he lied.
Yeah, I mean, they keep saying that he didn't remember certain aspects of this. Perhaps some of the way the prosecutors and the investigators were asking questions kind of confused him. But, you do bring up a good point here, is that this man, this Russian operative, Konstantin Kilimnik, there was a very strange relationship between Paul Manafort and Kilimnik. They had a business relationship, but, he's the guy that he shared polling data with, and it seems that the special counsel's office is really focused on their relationship, and that's what they say is the heart of their investigation, that relationship. What was Paul Manafort promising him? It could have to do with the sanctions, obviously. So that's what came up in that long hearing that was eventually the transcript was released. But again, what's interesting is that there's this ongoing battle that's still going on with Paul Manafort. I kind of feel like we need to move on from this. And I think the judge is partly to blame for this. She's drawing this out. And the real thing is, what is the point of this? Will this affect his sentence in any way? He's already pleaded guilty. He said he's ready for sentence. Let's move on. But the judge is just drawing this out, and she keeps asking him to file things, and she keeps having hearings. Maybe today we'll finally get some answers. But I think it's about time that kind of, we move on.
Is it, or could it be, and I hate to get into speculation, that again, if you look at the prosecution memo, that meeting and what happened at that meeting is of significance to the special counsel. That's what they say. And again, we can't connect these dots, so we can only look at the calendar. The Republican convention breaks on the 21st of July. This is on the 2nd of August. Why is the Trump campaign chairman going from his successful convention to meet with his longtime business partner, who is known to be a Russian operative? Why? That's a fair question. Let's not speculate beyond that. But could the holdup be that the the special counsel thinks there's a piece of information that Manafort's refusing to give them.
I mean, it could be, but I don't think so. I think they're pretty much done. I think they know they're going to get as much as they're going to get out of Paul Manafort. They know what was going on here. They have their theories. I will say to you, and I remember this from when I first started covering this, a lot of FBI agents, certainly that were getting involved in this investigation early on, felt that people like Paul Manafort and others in the campaign did not expect Trump to win. Right. And so they were trying to make business off of their connections to the president. And that could be what was going on here, that Manafort was hoping to stay in the good graces of Kilimnik so that he had no money, he needed money. So he was hoping to probably keep this relationship going so that he could make money. And that has been a theory of prosecutors and special counsel and FBI agents who've been looking at this investigation.
The swamp creatures thought he was going to lose, and they were trying to make money off it. Another big debate at the moment. The president is celebrating this, tweeting again today, no collusion, pointing to these words from the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Richard Burr, who says, we've been at this 2 years, and
I can assure you that any goodwill that might have existed in the committee with Michael Cohen is now gone. I would prefer to get him before he goes to prison. But you know, the way he's positioning himself, not coming to the committee, we may hope. I'm just saying what factually we found to date. We haven't finished with our investigation. Not sure how to put it any clearer than I said it before. We have no factual evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia.
It's that last part we wanted to get to. We might come to back to Michael Cohen later. But Chairman Burr saying 2 years in, we don't have any evidence in his view. His Democratic partner on the committee, the co-chairman of the committee, says, respectfully, I disagree. I'm not going to get into any conclusions I've reached because my basis of that has been I'm not going to reach any conclusion until we finish the investigation, and we still have a number of key witnesses to come back. Are there key witnesses? Who is the key witness? Who do they think has to come back and that Mark Warner thinks hasn't told the truth? Or, you know, the Democrats for 2 years have said Chairman Burr's doing this in a responsible way. We like Chairman Burr's cooperation. Is it time for the Democrats to say, we've looked under every rock? Let's go.
Well, in terms of the outstanding witnesses, Chairman Burr hinted to there with Michael Cohen and whatnot, but the Burr-Warner rift is actually really fascinating. That hasn't been discussed enough because since this investigation began, they have been intentionally working hand in glove. They know that this investigation, with how sensitive it is, it cannot be political or seen as political, and it was just such a dramatic contrast to the House Intelligence Committee leaders in the first 2 years of the presidency with Devin Nunes and Adam Schiff. But right now, the heart of this dispute, if you want to call it that, is the fact that Burr and Warner don't necessarily just disagree on the facts. They're kind of disagreeing on what they mean at this point. And right now, Warner is saying it's too premature, and Burr is saying, look, we have no factual evidence, and that's kind of where the problem is right now with the Senate committee leadership.
I also do think that there's been, even though there has been a good working relationship over the last 2 years on the Senate side and this committee, there's been a frustration, especially on the Democratic side, on Warner's side, that like, there's only so much the committee can do, constrained as they are by the Mueller investigation on one side, by the resources of the committee, by this sort of idea that you're doing it in a bipartisan way, which sort of kind of dumbs it down in a sense. You're not the hard charge. And look what's happening on the House side now. It's becoming a hard charging, aggressive investigation, and that's not what happened on the Senate side. So there is this frustration on Warner's side, like how can you make these conclusions? How can you draw the kind of conclusions that Burr did without the...
It is the committee that kind of had credibility among the FBI and the Department of Justice. It was the one committee that they were willing to work with. You know, Comey respected Burr, kind of had a lot of respect for him and was willing to work with him. So this is certainly interesting how this has developed.
And so one of the factual disputes or the context disputes here is we have CNN's documented at least 16 meetings between Trump campaign officials or Trump organization officials and Russians. Chairman Burr would say those were probably stupid. They probably should have told the truth about him, but we don't have any evidence they colluded. The word collusion. Mark Warner says, I want more information because that's suspicious. You want to learn more about this, find out everything you need to know about the Russia probe, go to CNN.com's interactive page. It lays out how the Trump team's stories have changed. This is why Democrats are suspicious. These stories have changed throughout the course of the investigation. The numerous contacts between the Trump team and Russia laid out there, the Comey firing, Mueller's legal process, all the players, potential legal pitfalls. It is a great primer if you get a little confused at times, as it's easy to get. Up next, what's actually in the Green New Deal and Senator McConnell's plan to take it to the floor. But first, the Senate Majority Leader name drops a certain 2020 Democrat.
So let's imagine President Amy Klobuchar in 20.
That's going to really help me with my base. Thank you. Thank you, Mitch.
This is CNN Breaking News.
I've noted with great interest the Green New Deal. And we're going to be voting on that in the Senate. We'll give everybody an opportunity to go on record and see how they feel about the Green New Deal.
Now, wait a minute. The Green New Deal is a big Democratic initiative. So why then is the Senate top Republican so eager to bring it to a vote? Remember, Mitch McConnell is from Kentucky, a coal state. And remember, just about every decision made in Washington these days, by McConnell or others, has a 2020 campaign wrinkle to it. The Green New Deal is indeed going to be a flashpoint in the 2020 campaign. Here's what the supporters want to do. It's an aspirational document, a resolution put before Congress. It has no binding authority, but they say they would like to get to net zero emissions by 2050. 100% clean and renewable energy, energy-efficient infrastructure, clean air, water, healthy food. Can't argue with that, right? Create millions of new jobs, its proponents say. The issue is when you start going through the details, a lot of this would cost a lot of money. Overhauling transportation, that would cost a lot of money. Upgrading all existing buildings, commercial buildings, residential buildings, who's going to pay for that? How are you going to pay for that? Providing universal health care is part of this document. Affordable housing, economic security. Republicans say, great idea maybe, how are you going to pay for it? They think they can use this to their electoral advantage. It's a big issue in the presidential race. There are 9 Democrats who've either announced they're running or announced exploratory committees. Of these 9, let's take a look. 7 say they're for the Green New Deal. Tulsi Gabbard's been a bit unclear. She says she wants to deal with climate change, but she wants to look at the specifics here. Not sure maybe this proposal goes too far. John Delaney, former Democratic congressman, former businessman, says it does go too far. You have to deal with climate change, but this is just too much, too pricey. But even the candidates who are for it, for example, Amy Klobuchar, Kirsten Gillibrand, when they talk about it, listen. Sometimes a little slightly different emphasis.
I'm in favor of it simply because I see it as a framework to jumpstart a discussion. I don't see it as something that we can get rid of all these industries or do this in a few years. That doesn't make sense to me, or reduce air travel.
We're for what we're for, and we want to see a green economy in the next decade, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. There's so much opportunity in this bill for economic growth and really fixing things that are broken, and so why not have an aspirational goal? And maybe some things are hard to get to, and maybe we won't actually get there, but why not at least try?
Why not? Look, the conversation is 20 years, Al Gore would argue 30 years or 40 years overdue,
right.
The conversation. But this town's not capable of a conversation. And so the question is, hats off to the Democrats pushing, let's have the conversation. There's a risk when you put these aspirational goals on paper, because it is T-ball for some Republicans.
And you see it already. I mean, we've gotten all the emails about getting rid of farting cows and everybody gets a new house and no more airplanes. You're going to see Republicans do this over and over again, basically sort of make big, bold assertions about what this big, bold plan would do, and then you're going to have Democrats try to make nuanced, nuanced comments and have a nuanced conversation about this. But that's really hard in this environment when you have a president who does like to basically deal in no nuance and sort of big ideas that people can sort of grab onto and ridicule this plan.
And it's one of these examples where two things can be true at the same time, in the sense that Democrats believe with younger voters, with suburban voters, with college-educated voters, they're ready for this debate. They want this debate. They want to have this discussion. Some of them may balk at some of the price tags, but they want to have the conversation. Republicans are also right when they say, look at the Trump electoral map. You want to try to sell this in Pennsylvania and in Michigan and in Wisconsin, or you're trying to take back Ohio and be competitive in the industrial Midwest, good luck.
So a couple thoughts. One, you mentioned for the 40 years, Al Gore might say it's 40 years too late. Remember, the other number is 12, with climate scientists warning that we have about 12 years before things risk becoming cataclysmic. That's at least as much on the minds of Democrats as any other figure. The other thing is, instructive to go back and look at the stimulus, the Obama stimulus, which had a lot of green energy stuff in it. The Republicans very successfully counterbranded that only with Solyndra, right, the solar panel, the failed solar panel company. The other data point is, of course, Nancy Pelosi making her caucus walk the plank and vote on climate change legislation that never got taken up by the Senate. I think Democrats are attuned to the dangers here. I do think, though, that the warnings that they're getting from climate experts are weighing very heavily.
If they can force the debate, good for them. Here's, again, Republicans are going to look for opportunity. This is a fact sheet put out by Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, her Green New Deal fact sheet. Economic security for people unable or unwilling to work. Republicans are going to jump on that, saying, wait a minute, why is the government going to pay for that? Provide job training and education to all. Build out high-speed rail. Air travel becomes unnecessary. Unsure if they can get rid of farting cow emissions. There it is. The flatulence argument that will come up. Now, again, the science is crystal clear. Sorry, Mr. President. Sorry to the Republicans who don't want to have the conversation. It's a long overdue conversation. The question is, as every second as I speak, we're closer to the 2020 election, will the Democrats stand firm or will they blink when some of their own members, like Joe Manchin of West Virginia, says, we can't do this right now?
So I think the Democrats will continue, for the most part, to endorse the broad strokes and the goal of the Green New Deal. But you're right that once you get out in the details, especially the details that are inadvertently or inaccurately released by one Congresswoman's office, it makes it way too easy for Republicans to go after Democrats on this. And I was talking with Senator Brian Schatz yesterday, and he was like, look, are we really going to hold every Democratic candidate to the standard of an errant FAQ, which is fair, but I mean, that's the kind of environment that we're in right now, and that's the influence that Ocasio-Cortez has in this field.
But they also can't, the Democratic Party can't afford not to try to motivate this sort of raucous, energetic part of their constituency, especially approaching the primary campaign, right? Like, ultimately, they will have to run against President Trump, assuming he's the guy running in office, but they first have to motivate their base, and this, whether it's being done well or poorly, or whether they're like putting out sort of information that isn't helpful, they still do need to figure out how to walk that line, and this broad issue is one that can help to do that.
And we're going to see some of the fault lines, I think, if this thing comes to a vote in the Senate. Obviously, we know some folks are already co-sponsors of it. They essentially have to vote for it, you would think. They're co-sponsors of it. And then you look at somebody like Sherrod Brown, right? What does he do on this? He's been skeptical of it and talking about it. In some ways, the way that Klobuchar has been as well. So we're going to see what his idea about where the party is as well.
To that point, once you have a nominee, these things get more clear. The president.
This is CNN Breaking News.
President of the United States at the White House.
See what happens. Okay? Thank you. Thank you very much.
How much longer is the United States will be able to tolerate the presence of Nicolas Maduro in the Palacio de Miraflores? Because currently there is a new president that you recognize and as official president, but he's living in Miraflores. How much longer?
Well, I have great respect for the man that many people think is the real president of Venezuela. He's very brave. It's a very brave situation, what he's doing, as you know. I've seen what's happened in the streets, and I've seen what's happened with executions, so I really give him a lot of credit. And I think it's going to work out very well.
Do you still consider any military solution for Venezuela?
Well, I think there are a number of solutions, a number of different options, and we look at all options.
And are you thinking in sending troops to Colombia? Like
I never talk about that.
Let me add something on the first question that was raised by Vanessa. President Guaido, who is the person about to lead this transition in Venezuela, has a strong support. And we need to give him even stronger support. I think what happened with the EU has been very important. We will host the Lima Group next week in Bogota, and we will, all the countries in the hemisphere, give him stronger support he needs to lead the transition in Venezuela.
President Trump, if President Maduro stays in power, do you have a plan B?
I always have plan B and C and D and E and F. I have great flexibility. I probably have more flexibility than any man that's ever been in this office. So we'll see. But there are many plans, and we'll see where we go. Right now, we're in an incredible period. I saw the tremendous numbers of people yesterday. You're talking about during the week, just numbers that you rarely see anything like at the protests. So we'll see a lot of things are happening in Venezuela that people don't know about. And there's a lot of support for what we're doing and for the people that we're talking to. A lot of support, tremendous support. What?
At the border now with Venezuela, what is the plan? How is it going to get into the country?
Well, they have to be able to let the food in, and in many cases it's getting in. They blocked one of the bridges, but they haven't been able to block the others. They'd like to try. I think he's making a terrible mistake by not allowing that to happen. It's showing bad things, and really we're trying to get food to people that are starving. You have people starving in Venezuela. And it just shows what can happen with the wrong government. You have the wrong government, bad things happen. But you have many, many people that are in really trouble for just hunger. And so we are delivering, and we're sending tremendous amounts of food and other things, supplies.
Mr. President, if I may add to that, I think we have to give a very strong message to the dictatorship. Obstructing the access of humanitarian aid is a crime against humanity. And we have to ensure that the humanitarian aid gets to the Venezuelan people, and Colombia is highly committed to receive humanitarian aid from the U.S. and other countries so that it can access Venezuela and help the Venezuelan people face
Well, we haven't gotten it yet. We'll be getting it. We'll be looking for landmines, because you could have that. You know, it's been known to happen before to people. But we have not gotten it yet. It'll be sent to us at some point, and we'll take a very serious look at it. We have a lot of things happening right now. We're building a lot of wall right now with money that we already have. And when people see what we're doing, I think they'll be very surprised. We're doing a lot of work, and we have planned to do a lot of work, but I have not seen it yet. I appreciate all the work the Republicans have done, because they're really going against a radical left. It's a radical left, and they're going against it very hard, and they're fighting. But we're in very good shape, and we're going to take a look at it when it comes. I don't want to see a shutdown. Shutdown would be a terrible thing. I think a point was made with the last shutdown. People realized how bad the border is, how unsafe the border is. And I think a lot of good points were made, but I don't want to see another one. There's no reason for it. And we're going to look at the legislation when it comes, and I'll make a determination then. Actually, it will be regardless of what I do. You know, we already have, as you know, a lot of money where we're building existing wall with existing funds. But I have a lot of options. Just like we do with Venezuela, we have on the border. And we have a lot of options, and a lot of things are happening, very positive things. You know, the numbers are almost $23 billion, which you don't report too often. It's about an 8% increase over last year. So if you look at the total funding, it's almost up to $23 billion. It's about 8% higher. The border area is happening. It's going to happen at a really rapid pace. We're giving out contracts right now, and we're going to have a great wall. It's going to be a great, powerful wall. People will not be able to get through that wall very easily. And I think you see that. I think you see it happening. It's very important. It'll also have technology. It'll have drones. It'll have everything else we have. If you look at the other elements, ICE funding will be complete. We have other things happening which people aren't talking about, but we've got a lot of funds for a lot of other things. But with the wall, they want to be stingy. But we have options that most people don't really understand.
Are you considering sending 5,000 troops to Colombia?
You'll see.
Yes. Will you be willing to offer this? Are you open to that?
Any other questions?
Will the Colombian president allow that?
Say it. Mr. President. I'll be visiting. I really want to. I want to visit Colombia. I look forward to visiting. We're working very, very closely on the drug situation.
Mr. President, would you consider an amnesty to Maduro, for Maduro?
Or exile?
Something we haven't thought of. Something we haven't thought of. Well, it's always interesting. Anything Ted does is interesting. So that's certainly an interesting one.
What that means that we're going to know in Colombia's drug policy.
Yeah, we are working together so that Colombia eradicates some of what they're growing in Colombia. I wouldn't say that at this moment you're ahead of schedule, but hopefully you will be sometime in the near future.
But let me mention something to that question, Mr. President. In the first 4 months of our administration, we have eradicated 60,000 hectares, more than was eradicated in the previous 8 months. We have a goal, and we will commit to that goal, because it is our moral duty to have Colombia free of illegal crops and free of narco trafficking. We have to deliver, we will deliver, because it is our moral duty.
Mr. President,
I just want to say before you leave, the economy is doing incredibly well. Numbers are really high, really good. We have a big team of people, very talented people over in China right now, negotiating on the China deal. It's going along very well. We'll see what happens, but I think it's going along very well. They're showing us tremendous respect, and something which a lot of countries didn't used to show the United States. They're showing us respect now. Big difference from the old days, I will tell you that. So the deal with China is going very well. The economy is doing fantastically. You saw the Gallup poll that came out, 69% or so say they're going to be in better shape next year than even this year, and they're very happy right now. And that's the best numbers they've had in 16 or 17 years. But the economy is strong. We have a lot of companies coming into the United States. They want to come into the United States. So we have a lot of good things happening. And the wall is being built as we speak. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you.
President of the United States there in the Oval Office, President Ivan Marquez of Colombia, splitting their time. A lot of conversation there about the political crisis in Venezuela, both leaders pledging their support to the man who has called himself the interim president. President Maduro refuses to step down, but the international community, including countries in the region, among them Colombia, have called on him to step down in favor of Juan Guaido, both leaders expressing their support there. The president at the end saying many things about the proposed spending compromise. Many of the things the president said, not true or not factual, but let's discuss it around the table. The president said Democrats are being stingy when it comes to the wall. They're certainly offering a lot less. He also said several times a lot of wall was being built. The facts would not support the way the president spun it there. He talked about the radical left, but he said he does not want to have a shutdown, again indicating that he may not like this, what's about to come to his desk, but by all indications is he's going to sign it.
Yeah, I think that that's a signal there that, he's not going to like it. He'll complain about it. But he'll eventually sign it, and then he'll take some sort of action on his own, and then that can be litigated, in the political arena or in the courts elsewhere.
You have a parallel universe sometimes when you watch these events, in the sense that, again, the president repeatedly saying new wall is being built. There are plans to start construction on a modest section of new wall in the Rio Grande area. No other new wall has been built as of today. As we sit here today, the president keeps saying, again, trying to convince his supporters, I'm getting this one way or the other, that there's new wall already built.
Yeah.
Go to the border, not the case. He also says the point was made during the shutdown. If you look at the polling, the president's numbers did not go up, and in some cases went down. Support for the wall stayed majority oppose. Asked people if they want an emergency declaration or some national emergency. No. And the proposal the president's going to get today gives him less money than he could have signed before the shutdown. What was the point that was made?
Yeah, I think the point that we saw today, I think the president trying to create his own reality and talk to his supporters, right? I mean, several times, building a lot of walls, spending a lot of money, border area is happening, contracts are going out, the wall is being built as we speak. He ended that saying that, and I think it's the same thing when he's essentially trying to spin the loss to Pelosi as a win, essentially saying, all of the points that I made there in terms of the border being dangerous were successful, and we don't need to do that again. But yeah, I think you made this point earlier. It's like he is talking to those supporters, and he knows his supporters are largely with him, and they essentially take their cues from him. He had that big rally. It was finish the wall, right? At some point, I think folks were saying, build the wall, build the wall. He was like, no. It's finish the wall at this point because it's already being built in his mind.
And I think, what was the point that was made during the shutdown? The point was made, the rest of Washington thinks, the point was made to the president, don't do this again, right? The pain is real politically. The pain is real for the people who were suffering financially from it. The pain is real for institutions and organizations like air traffic and the like, which had to sort of shut down or alter because of it. And I think the message that was gotten, and it looks like it's gotten through, I mean, if we're to believe what he says, is that he doesn't want to go through that again.
Yeah, let's talk briefly about the Venezuela conversation, because too often, because we're in the middle of this big budget fight, because we just had a government shutdown, because we're heading into the 2020 campaign, sometimes the big international news doesn't get enough attention. This is a big deal. Once prosperous, one of the most prosperous countries in the neighborhood, if you will, now in a mess because of the Maduro regime. This administration, with bipartisan support, has said Maduro must go.
And international support.
And international support. You heard the president of Colombia saying they have a meeting next week to try to increase the pressure. What should we look for there? What's the U.S. piece, and what's the more closer in the neighborhood piece?
Well, all the attention is always on the president when he says all options are on the table, including the military option, right? That gets the headlines. That's a pretty rote formula that we hear from presidents all the time. I think what I'm looking for in particular is help to Colombia, because no country in that neighborhood has been more affected than them. They've had hundreds of thousands of refugees pouring over the border. That takes a lot of time, energy, money, resources to feed, to clothe, to house, to protect, and the rest of that. watching that's going to be very important. It was interesting to hear the president talk about what we are doing and the president of Colombia talk about a more, should we say, hemispheric approach, avoiding putting the U.S. stamp on a policy that the continent, the whole region remembers American interventionism. I think it's going to be interesting to see whether they can get, as the Colombian president said, a hemisphere-wide consensus behind Juan Guaido. I don't know because of Mexico and Cuba. I don't know where they could get, whether they can get that. But if they can get that, it's significant.
Whether you can get them there. It's a key point you made, the different ways the President of Colombia and the President of the United States talked about this in terms of how best to approach it, including the fact that President Trump said "that man" twice about Juan Guaido, the President of Colombia, knew his name. Up next, Congressman Omar responds to the President of the United States on a very heated issue.
This is CNN Breaking News.